welcome to Effective Meeting Management. Hello to my channel surfers out there. There are several folks that have been checking in with us that have been staying up late and also going to sleep in the middle of class, but that's okay. You're not enrolled, so you can sleep through whatever part you want to. But I do enjoy hearing from you people that are tuning in just for fun. It's nice to know that some people like getting educated even if they're not getting credit for it through the university. That's encouraging and refreshing. If you were with us last time, you know that we talked about the basic content of a set of bylaws and went through the kinds of issues that might be included in those. Today we're going to go back and review a little bit by unscrambling some motions. I didn't bring the building blocks in. We'll probably get those back next week or so. But we're going to do that, and then we're going to go back and take another look at voting. A couple of weeks ago we talked about kinds of voting. Want us to review on that and talk about the implications of that from a numerical standpoint. If you're the one who has to calculate the votes and determine was this person elected or not, did the motion pass or not, did the bylaws amendment carry or not. We actually have a math component in this class, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that. But let me ask you first of all, do you think it makes any difference how names are placed on a ballot? Have you ever thought about that? You know, you go to the polls and you vote and the names are there. You get a ballot at an organizational meeting and the names are on there. How are they usually on?
Alphabetical?
Okay, most of them that I've encountered, they're on alphabetically. Do you think that makes any difference? Rod, what do you?
For lazy voters, they might, you know, see the first name and just bubble it in or circle it or whatever.
Okay, for either lazy or uninformed voters who want to go through the machinations of voting but don't really know the candidates, that could be a factor. Is there a way that would be any fairer? If you were in charge of putting the ballot together and someone just said, get us some ballots for this election, what would you do?
Biased and want to put the incumbent's name first.
Okay, you think you'd want to put the incumbent first. Well, that's one way to do it. I'm not sure it's inherently good or bad. What else could you do? I can remember in high school, I can't remember if it was for council elections or what, but warping a scripture, one of the teachers said, the first shall be last and the last shall be first, and so she reversed the order that they were nominated. Now, I don't know if that made any difference in the election or not, but she took the names that were nominated, like I said, and then reversed them, and we voted backwards. So that's one possibility, to simply take what you have and reverse it. What else could you do?
You just put them in random order, I guess.
Okay, and how would you get a random order?
Just assign each one a number and shuffle them and draw straws.
Okay, just pull the names, whether you put a number on them and drew the numbers or wrote the last name on a slip of paper and shook them up, but some sort of random order. And I think there are a number of groups that probably do that in order to get them on the ballot. There's an article I'm going to tell you about in just a minute that was published in the Parliamentary Journal, and let me get this up here so folks can see it. This is a national journal on parliamentary procedure. To my knowledge, it's the only one of its kind in the country. It's put out by the American Institute of Parliamentarians. National Association of Parliamentarians has has a journal, but it's more like a magazine with more convention news and things. But this is the only scholarly journal around. It has some fun articles in it too, so it's not 100% scholarly, but most of it is. And this particular issue is the April 1995. And I wanted to share with you the thoughts of I'll find it, of one author who wrote in who was very concerned about the equity issue and in the problem of creating an unbalanced oh, that's not even a word, an unbiased ballot. I can say this, new tongue twister. An unbiased ballot. Because even if you pick the names randomly, which is fair, there's still the concern that the ballot may be an unfair ballot because whoever was lucky enough to draw slots 1 and 2, or if you're electing 3 people out of 12, the people up there at the top may have the advantage. And he said, he identified several things. He said there's the alphabetical order, which we didn't talk about, but the order that they were nominated is one way you could go. Determine the order by lot, which is what we just said with the random order. And then he had a real strange system that I've never seen anybody use, and probably wouldn't. And I should say this is a Franklin McKechnie, I think he pronounces his name, who is both a medical doctor and a professionally registered parliamentarian, and he lives in Winter Park, Florida. But what he came up with and said, if this is an issue and you really want to try to create an unbiased ballot, then you might do something, and let's see if we can get this one. I know it's on a white background, which is going to glare a little bit. But the idea here is to put the names on the ballot in such a way that there's no top or bottom to the ballot. And then you would put your X over here in one of these boxes. So this says M. Jane Doe. I know it's a little hard to read, and we won't have it up long. But Jane Doe, the different candidates' names are in all of these various slots, and you could either write it on the side or you could have a line running out that way. But theoretically, no matter which way you turn the ballot, you know, there wouldn't be a top or a bottom to the ballot. So I don't know, that's a lot of trouble. We'll come back to this thing in just a minute. We would be going to a lot of trouble to create a ballot that looked like that. But at least the idea is an important one, that you want as unbiased a ballot as you can possibly create, if you think that's a problem within the group. Okay, we'll be talking about voting more a little later on. Were there any questions left over last time regarding the bylaws? Yeah.
On the others added section of the bylaws, that was after Article 10, would you create the Article 11, Article 12, and so on? Or
Oh, okay, that's a good question. No, normally the last 3 articles, even if they're number 25, 26, 27, are the indemnification, the parliamentary authority. Well, indemnification would be in the 4th slot. But anyway, the last 3 are the parliamentary authority, the method of amendment, and the dissolution clause. And if some of those others were included, they would go back in like Article 7 or Article 9. In fact, go ahead.
What I gathered from the tape was that, at least from the beginning, it doesn't, none of these all these have to be included in some way, shape, or form.
The ones that I listed, Robert says should be on there. The name, object, membership, officers, meetings, executive committee, committees, parliamentary authority, a method of amendment, dissolution. Did I skip one? I think I got them all. I didn't know I was going to give myself a pop quiz here. Those 99% of the time you'll have all of those categories. There might be an exception somewhere if you didn't have an executive board.
But the order in which they're in isn't that important, except for the last 3 being.
It makes good sense to put them in that order. If you started talking about the officers before you talked about the membership, it would be kind of confusing. What are these officers in charge of? Or if you started talking about the board of directors before you talked about the membership, it would look like the bylaws were creating a board. And sometimes they do. I'm on one little board that has between 11 and 14 people on it. And depending on whether all the slots are filled at any point in time. But the bylaws that we have are only about 4 pages long, and they're for that board. and they're the governing document for it. They talk about how the directors are elected on 3-year terms, staggered terms, and so forth. And we might insert here that when you have that kind of a provision with staggered terms, the first time you elect those directors, you just draw straws to see, elect 9 people, and 3 have a 1-year term, 3 have a 2-year term, 3 have a 3-year term. That just draw straws. Or say that the people who got the most votes get the 3-year terms. The second most batch of votes go to the people with the 2-year terms, or the 2-year terms go to those people. And then the 3 that are down in slots 7, 8, and 9, maybe out of 15 candidates or whatever, they get the 1-year terms. And then they're up for re-election first. But after the first round, 2 years in, then you've got all the people being elected on their 3-year cycle. And you don't have a problem after that. If someone resigns, then you would elect to fill that slot. If someone resigns on a faculty senate term here or on this board that I'm referring to, if I had served 2 years of that term and for health reasons, personal reasons, whatever, couldn't continue, then they would elect someone to fill that 1-year slot. Now sometimes you have in the bylaws a stipulation that says that a person can serve no more than 2 terms. So then it becomes a question, if you're on a 3-year term and you don't serve the whole term, if I leave and George is elected for that 1-year term, then does he get 1 more 3-year term, or does he get 2 more 3-year terms so that he actually serves 7 years? Any idea what happens there?
I assume since it's a new person, it starts over. The term.
Okay, what if he serves 2 years? Is he a new person? If you've served 2 years of a 3-year term.
Okay, maybe let's say 2 out of 3 years would be considered 1 term.
Yeah.
And one out of 3 would probably not be considered a full term.
Okay, good guess. Or you read it and it's in your subconscious. Robert says if you've served more than half of them, we're talking about the general here, Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. If you've served more than half of the term, whether it's 1.5 years plus a day, I'm not sure how many days that is, on the 3-year term, or if maybe it's a presidency and it says the president is limited to 2 1-year terms and the president resigns, dies, whatever, and the vice president takes over. If the vice president has served more than half of the year, more than half of the term, they can only stand for election for 1 more year. But if it's been less than half, or half then less, half then less, half, what am I trying to say? Half or less, then, I've got too many numbers going through my head because of some things we're going to do here in a minute. If it's been half of the term or less than more than half, how's that for phrasing? Then you're eligible for 2 terms. So you could have a person who actually ends up serving 2.5 terms in the office. But anyway, that's where the drawing line is unless the bylaws say otherwise. Okay, I brought back again the bylaws of the American Institute of Parliamentarians, and these are included in the directory. It's not an unusual thing for an organization to publish their annual directory and include the bylaws in that so that all the members of the organization have a copy of the bylaws. I would not want to belong to any organization that I could not put my hands on the bylaws and at least take a look at them once upon a time. And years ago there was a group that was a subset of the National Speech Association that solicited membership. Here's a new, well, they weren't that new, they've been around 8 or 10 years, but they were trying to build their membership base. And so, here came the little form, please check this, pay your dues, be part of us. And I wrote back to their national secretary and I said, you sound like an interesting group, would you send me a set of your bylaws? And because I wanted to see what their purposes were, how long their officers served, was I committing myself to any additional commitments? You know, if you become a member, do you promise to serve on 3 committees for the next year? You know, what are you getting into here? And the secretary wrote back and said, it's not our policy to distribute the bylaws to the members. And so I wrote on the form, it's not my policy to join organizations that I don't understand their structure, purpose, etc. So I went to some of their programs, and those were nice, but I never did pay my dues with that group. Because your bylaws are your contract between you and the organization. You know, and they may sometimes say things like we talked last time, that if you become a member of this group, you may not join another similar group. Now, the 2 parliamentary national organizations, the 2 big ones, there's some other smaller ones too, are very cooperative with one another. They have similar goals, but they kind of reach a different segment of the population. But neither tries to tell their members what they can or can't do. You know, whereas sororities and fraternities will tell you if you belong to one, you can't, generally, if you belong to one, you can't belong to another. And so if those things are important to you, you need to know that, you need to read the bylaws and find out what you're getting into. Okay, I thought we might just run through some of the articles and subsections of AIP's bylaws. You don't necessarily have to write these down, but if you hear something that appeals to you that you think you might use in your take-home exam, that you might use in some organization that you work with, then, you know, make a note. But there's no point that I'm going to say, can you spit back out to me all the articles that are here. But because this is an organization of parliamentarians, they are really meticulous about things. I mean, they have standing rules and they have all kinds of stuff, as you're going to see. So let's thumb through some of this, chat about a bit of it, and then we'll see also how there is a difference in the vote required in order to modify parts of the document. So Article 1, as you might expect, is name. Article 2, purpose. Article 3, membership. Now, membership breaks down into 7 subsections. Section 1, eligibility. You know, who can be a member? Well, anyone interested in parliamentary procedure is eligible for membership. Okay, Section 2, instatement. Any person eligible for membership may become a member by completing the application form and paying the annual dues. Section 3, membership classifications. The classes of membership shall be, and each one of these is defined, individual, institutional, and then they also have senior life and honorary life, but these are really defunct categories that they don't use anymore. But sometimes when you form a group or you modify a group, you may discover that there are people that have been given rights that you no longer wish to give to anyone else. For example, Section 3, subsection C says senior life. Senior life membership shall be limited to those who held this classification prior to August 11, 1974, and who retain all the rights of a dues-paying member. And otherwise, you know, and I don't even know what that is. I don't know anyone. I don't know anybody that has that. I certainly didn't have it. But anyway, apparently way back when in the founding, or not the founding days, but the early days of the organization, there were some life members who had certain rights, and they're not doing that anymore. But you can't go back and undo something that's been granted. You know, if you've been given life memberships in the XYZ society, then no matter what we do to the dues, even if we abolish life memberships now, you still are entitled to yours because you got it fair and square. And so you're grandfathered, as it were, and you keep those rights. If you paid a life membership fee of $100 and now the life membership fee is $500, they can't go back and charge you the extra $400. You got it when it was $100. Texas Speech Association brought in a lot of life members 8 or 10 years ago, just before the increase went in. You know, they were going in at the close. They adopted a number of bylaws changes that would go into effect at the close of the convention. And the executive secretary kindly and astutely said, let me point out to you folks who pay your dues today, you know, before we adjourn tomorrow for the next year, that you can still get in at the old rate. And boy, people had those checkbooks out in a hurry because it became a good deal. Okay, there's an honorary life category, and that's limited to the people who had that status prior to August 20th, 1990. So there was an amendment that did away with that too, and they're not doing that anymore. Okay, so all of this is under membership classifications. A, individual, B, institutional, C, senior life, D, honorary life, and then Section 4 deals with dues. The dues for each class of membership shall be regular, and just for fun, for a ballpark reference, regular, $30, certified parliamentarian, those are the people who passed a written exam, which is a real killer, $40, and then a certified professional parliamentarian is $50, regular under 25 years of age, $20, and institutional memberships, $35. Okay, National Association of Parliamentarians calls their people regular members, professional parliamentarians when they've passed the written exam, and when they've done the complete whole whammy, then those people are called professional registered parliamentarians. So their people are up at the top are the PRPs, and these people are the CPPs. Okay, I'm a PRP, but I'm a CPP, because you end up paying more dues both places and all. AIP also tests over a variety, this is your little tangent for the day, but AIP tests over Sturgis and Demeter and a number of parliamentary authorities. National Association of Parliamentarians test over Robert only, and that's the primary distinction between those two organizations. In reality, it doesn't prove to be a really big deal because, as we've said before, about 90-95% of the country uses Robert anyway, and AIP even uses Robert as their parliamentary authority. But they take into account the other authorities, and there's some things in their standing rules that are exceptions to Robert. And you can do that. You know, if you make rules that are exceptions to the parliamentary authority, those take priority. Okay. Section 5, we were on Section 4, which is dues. Section 5 is the membership year. Doesn't matter particularly what it is, you just need to agree on it and write it down somewhere. Some groups do the membership year from the time you pay your dues, it just runs a calendar year, but most groups will say it's the calendar year, you know, January 1 to December 31st, or it's April 1 to March 31st, and it coincides with their fiscal year. You can do it either way. Kind of depends a little on what kind of headquarters you have, what kind of staff the executive director has. If you have 5,000, 30,000 members that all need to pay dues by April 1st and they're all going to come in March, that gives you a concentrated workload, which is very different from being able to process those dues all year long. But most groups that I belong to do focus them and put them on the calendar year, which is probably easier for record keeping. Trissy?
So you're saying that the membership year would coincide with the, we would be equivalent to the Article 5 meetings and the one that you gave us on the last class time?
No, the fiscal year just tells you when your membership dues are good. When are your dues expired? When do you, kind of like a magazine subscription, when does it run out? And when do you need to pay your dues again to be a member in good standing? But we're going to come to meetings in just a minute, but the meetings tell you when the meetings occur. Yeah?
I'm not sure if I missed this or not. Is this a section under dues that explains membership? Is this
No, it's Section 5. It's the next little section. Yeah. And all of these are short. They won't even show up on the overhead, but they're just little sections, a sentence or two on each section. Okay, classification. Section 6. Most groups don't have this, but it says that if you don't pay your dues, then you'll be classified as inactive, and if you come back in, they can decide whether to reactivate you as a regular member, or if you've been up at the CPP status, they can give you your classification back. But that takes a 2/3 vote of the board of directors. And it probably would be influenced by, did your dues only lapse for a few weeks, or did you not pay dues for 5 or 10 years, and then you want to come back in. But the reason would be looked upon by the board of directors. And then Section 7 is termination. Membership shall terminate certainly by death, but also by expulsion, resignation, or failure to pay dues after 2 notices and the expiration of 60 days after the due date. It's important to know when your members aren't members anymore. Okay? Student government here, Student Association at U of H got itself in a mess several years ago that I don't think they ever really waded out of. They just kind of mucked along and went on and got new officers and our new senators and went from there. But I haven't read their bylaws in several years. But at that time, the bylaws said something to the effect that you were removed as a senator if you had missed 3 consecutive meetings and had been given, and then you were to be given notice by the secretary and so forth. Well, the way it was phrased, it was hard to tell whether or not you were still a member until you had received notice that you'd been terminated. And that was kind of, as I recall, the implication of it. So if you'd missed the meetings but hadn't gotten the written notice that you were no longer a senator, then were you a member or not? And my interpretation at the time was yes, you were. But anyway, so there's an ambiguity zone in there between absences and notification. But see, this spells it out much more specifically. But they got in a situation because they weren't sure whether they had a quorum or not. If these people who hadn't been coming were not members, then the quorum was different from, if a quorum's a majority and you've got 20 members, I don't know how many senators we have right now, I've forgotten. But if these people were members, then the quorum is much higher than if they're not members. Because a majority of 25 is going to be 13. A majority of 30 is going to be 16. See how that works? So you need to know who's on your membership list. And with national organizations, it makes a difference. You need to know whether you're going to keep sending these people publications, because it's expensive to send out a journal like this 4 times a year. And if you're not a member anymore and you haven't paid your dues, then you shouldn't be getting this. And there are other publications, there are newsletters and other notices that go out. So in order to determine your quorum, in order to know whether to send people notices that their dues are due or other information and publication, you need to know who your members are. You also need to know in terms of anticipated revenue, what you have going on there. Okay, don't want to bog down in that though. Okay, typical Article 4, officers. Section 1 names the officers. The following shall be, first vice president. They have a first, second, third vice president, a secretary, president of course, secretary and treasurer, and then also counted as an officer in this group is an accrediting director, because this is the person that has the major primary responsibility for certifying parliamentarians. And they view that individual and that responsibility as so significant that they make that individual an officer of the organization. But we talked last time about how there may be all sorts of people, from the supreme basileus to the supreme anti-basileus to the tamius. I mean, the grand counselor, the grand worthy advisor, the super duper trooper, I don't know. You know, you can call your officers whatever you want to, but that's where you specify them in the bylaws. Section 1, who are the officers? Okay, you may do terms of office next. In this case, they did Section 2, eligibility. Who is eligible to be an officer? And this says a person shall be a member of AIP for at least 1 year to be eligible to be elected to office. Now that's a pretty open, wide, and flexible policy. There are other organizations that will say something like you must have served on the National Council or the National Board of Directors or whatever they, you know, whatever you're calling that big national group. Must have served on the National Council a minimum of 3 years, a minimum of 6 years. And it depends on the group and what kind of responsibilities the officers have. You know, and with the sororities and fraternities, for example, there's usually some pretty stiff criteria in there just because of the knowledge that's required. You wouldn't want someone who, I don't think, there may be a group out there somewhere I haven't encountered yet, that would want someone who is a sophomore at a university to be elected national president. You know, they just don't have the experience and the repertoire of experiences to be capable of dealing with that. So it's very often that you'll find in this section either, or in this article on officers, under one of the sections, some stipulations about the eligibility requirements of the officers, and this is where they belong. Under terms of, then section 3 is term of office, and in their case they have distinguished between the officer's term of office and the accrediting director's term of office, and we won't go into that, but there's some differences there. Section 4 is vacancy. What are you going to do if there's a vacancy? And particularly if you're talking about a national organization or even a state organization. It's increasingly important there, but even if it's your area civic club or gardening society or whatever, what are you going to do if there's a vacancy? Someone resigns, whether it's personal reasons, health, whatever. How are you going to fill that? And some groups will say that the officer, in this case it says a vacancy in the office of president shall be filled by the first vice president. The resulting vacancy or any other vacancy shall be filled by the board of directors. So in this case, all the vice presidents don't bump up the line. And you'd need to know that. But because of the responsibilities that those officers have, it would really confuse the operation of the organization to have all 3 officers shifting gear. We looked in the Texas bylaws and saw Texas Speech Association bylaws last time, and saw that it's the vice president-elect who presides at meetings in the absence of the president. But if the president were to resign or be removed from office, then the president-elect would move on, or the vice president would move on up. But they'd have to do some shifting there. So very often the vacancies are taken care of by the board of directors, but other times an election is conducted to fill that. So it can go any of several ways. Okay, Article 5 in this case specifies the duties of the officers. Now the sample we looked at last time, a short job description just went with the naming of each officer, and those were handled as sections in the article on officers. But in this case, because they've got a lot of duties specified that are unique, and we won't go through those, Article 5 deals with the duties of the officers. Article 6 deals with the executive director. And this is a person who is employed to manage the national headquarters in Maryland and is employed by the board of directors. But the executive director has some very specific, the term of office is defined, there's some duties that are defined, certain responsibilities are defined. And those are important enough, significant enough that they're spelled out in the bylaws. Okay, in this case, and this is one we didn't talk about before, in these bylaws, Article 7 deals with sessions. the annual session or the annual meeting, and there's some so Article 7 session, Section 1 annual session, and then Section 2 special session, like a special meeting. Section 3 notice, what kind of notification do the members have to have? Because it would be rude to call a national convention an annual. Usually a convention is of delegates, and an annual session is just a meeting of all the members. So an annual meeting, an annual session. And if it's a session, it's made up of several meetings. So we're kind of playing a little semantic game here, but if you're wondering why this is called the annual session instead of the annual convention. But there are a lot of groups that call their meetings the annual convention when what it really is an annual session. So usually convention is delegates, session is members, but most people don't know that, so they call the annual session an annual convention. And it's okay as long as everybody's happy. But anyway, their annual session, their special session, how do you get those called? What kind of notice needs to be given? Most groups will say at least 60 days notice. Some only say 30 if you have set in the bylaws the way Texas Speech does that it's the second weekend in October unless voted otherwise by the membership. Quorum is put in here. Section 4 is quorum. Okay, Article 8 is the Board of Directors, and the information on AIP's Board of Directors runs for about a page and a half. Section 1, the duties. Section 2, the membership, and this has a limit of no more than 24 members. And at each annual session, the members shall elect up to 16 directors. Officers shall become directors at the beginning of their term, of the officer's term. So, but anyway, the membership. Section 3, nominations. How are you going to get those? Number 4, the term. The directors serve one term or until their successors are elected. It's very important when you're talking about terms of office, whether it's the officers, the directors, whomever, that they serve X amount of time or, rather than and. You're going to say or until the successors are elected. Then if you have a crummy accrediting director, a bad editor, whatever, you can simply declare a new election and elect a new person to fill that position. But if you say they shall serve a one-year term and until their successor is elected, then they have to stay in there. It's locked in. So that's a place where that little conjunction is very important. And you want or, not and. Normally you don't have to move people from office, but every once in a while an organization does. And there are easy ways to do it and difficult ways. Okay, but the Board of Directors, Section 1, duties, Section 2, membership, Section 3, nominations, Section 4, term of office, Section 5, vacancy. Again, what do you do if you lose a director? Section 6, meetings. This says the board shall meet at least 3 times a year, pre- and post-annual session, and then one interim meeting. That the board shall also convene upon the call of the president and any 4 directors. So if headquarters had a major fire or needed to be moved from one state to another, or so, there might be some really big things that could occur that you'd really need to convene the board of directors. So the president plus 4 directors could do that. Okay, Section 6 was meetings, Section 7 quorum, Section 8 power to act. Section 9 is a different one that we haven't talked about a lot, mail ballot. Can the organization do business by mail? And now with all the new technology, there's even a question of whether you can, but some groups are putting in their bylaws that voting by email is okay. The new MSLEC group that formed included in theirs. The phone votes are not okay because you can't confirm that in writing. There are situations where you need to have the written decision recorded. You could poll people by telephone and get an understanding that I'm going to write you a letter within the next 72 hours that indicates my position. on this. But anyway, mail ballots need to be provided for, email if you're going to go that route. Okay, in these bylaws, Article 9 is the Executive Committee. And again, it goes through duties, membership terms, vacancy meetings, notice, and quorum. Same subsections again. This group has an advisory counselor. They have counselors who serve as the advisory council. So Article 10 is the advisory council, its purpose, its membership, the election and tenure of those people. But these are the ones that are turned to generally for advice if there are new parliamentary issues that emerge that have not been addressed in the parliamentary authority, if advice and counsel is needed on anything in particular. Okay, Article 11 is standing committees, the names of the committees, this part's familiar, the names of the committees, the membership, how it's selected, and so on. And then the committees are named, bylaws and rules, education, and those are the two big committees with this group. But Texas Speech, as we saw, has a whole string of committees. I think their standing committees. They have that committee to nominate the nominating committee. They have the nominating committee. There's a time and place committee, a bylaws committee, a speech teacher of the year committee, a committee on speech and drama in public schools, one for two-year colleges, one for colleges and universities. There's a public relations committee, or an awards committee, a resolution committee. Now, they've got lots of standing committees. Okay, back to AIP bylaws, and we're nearly through here. Article 12 deals with publications, some stuff about the Parliamentary Journal, information about the Communicator, which is their regular newsletter. Article 13, they have a tax-exempt foundation, the AIP Memorial Foundation. All of that's in Article 13. Article 14, let's see, we're over our regular number here. They also have a detailed certification program, so there are 3 sections there: the purpose, the qualifications, the method of examination for the certification program. Article 15 deals with chapters. You know, many groups don't have chapters, they just are themselves. But in this case, Section 1 deals with the chapter committees. Section 2 talks about the chapters themselves. Section 3, how new chapters are formed. Section 4, how you petition in order to get a chapter. Section 5, bylaws of the chapters and how they have to conform to national and do some other things. Section 6 on the dissolution of chapters, and subsection A is the voluntary dissolution. You know, if the chapter decides they're done, they're through, they want to dissolve, there's a fat paragraph on how that works. And then there's involuntary dissolution. If the chapter is not performing up to the standards of national, then here is spelled out the hurdles they have to jump and the vote of the board, which is 2/3, and so some other things, but basically a 2/3 vote of the board to revoke a charter, even if the group wants to remain. Okay, AIP is divided into regions all over the country. Article 16 deals with those regions. Section 1, purpose. Section 2, boundaries. Section 3, bylaws for the regions. Section 4, meetings. Section 5, what happens if they fail to hold conferences. Section 6, finances. Section 7, elections. And 8, and they call their people governors. Section 8, the governor's duties. That's like being the president of the region or something. Then we're nearly to the end. Articles, I've lost my numbers here, 10, 15, 17 is indemnification. Article 18, referendum and amendment. And that breaks down into referendums, amendments of the bylaws. And then they also have an action program and a code of ethics and standing rules. So it takes a 2/3 vote of the members present and voting at the annual session with previous notice to amend the bylaws, the action program, or the code of ethics. Or, option B, a 4/5 vote if at least 12 hours notice has been given. So they recognize there may be an emergency situation, but you know, the ante is up on that. But it shouldn't be such an emergency, you know, you can't do it on 3 or 4 hours notice. but 4/5 and 12 hours. It's the only group I know with that little formula. To amend the standing rules, a majority vote of the people present and voting at the annual session if notice was given with the notice of the annual meeting, or a 2/3 vote with 12 hours notice. Normally, standing rules in your local club would take a majority vote, according to Robert. Okay, and then amendment of the standing orders, majority vote of the people present and voting, even if there was not previous notice. And then they go into a whole section on standing rules of procedure, the rules for the order of business, rules for standing committees, rules for the conduct of elections, and under standing rules is where they have their parliamentary authority and a minutes approval committee. And one way to get minutes approved, instead of having the whole group do it, is to appoint a committee of 3 people to review the minutes at the close of the convention. And you take the word of that group that, yes, the minutes are in good shape. Then you can go ahead and mail them out to the people.
They were meticulous, and obviously, because they're parliamentarians, are I know you showed some other sets of bylaws, but the average set of bylaws are not going to be well, I'm not going to say anywhere close to that long, but.
Oh, but you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. A simple set of bylaws like this little board that I'm on, I think those bylaws run 3.5 pages. And that's enough. That's all we need to operate. We don't have chapters. We don't have regions. We don't have indemnification clauses. None of that stuff is applicable. But now the IMSLEC group that I was talking about last time, the International Multi-Structured Language Association, I think I got that right. And if you're listening out there, I apologize. That's why acronyms are so useful. Their bylaws, this is, was the first annual meeting of that group, and those bylaws were 15 or 16 pages long like these. But that's because they're new and they're being very careful to say everything that they once said and to get it all down on paper. So there's no doubt about what's going on for the people who are coming in. I suspect as time goes on, they'll find ways to amend that and more concise statements. They've got probably 10 or 15 purposes listed right now that are very specific. I think those will probably merge into some broader philosophical statements once their membership is stabilized and it's kind of inherently known and passed on through tradition who they are. Do you have a follow-up question? Yeah,
so what you're saying is pretty much the size and the reach of the organization would dictate the length of the bylaws?
Yeah. And whether or not you have all these administrative layers. If you have several layers of bureaucracy, then you have to spell all that out, how your regions are going to work, and if the regions elect delegates to an annual convention and all those kinds of things. And that's just much more complicated than if you're a book reading club or a horticulture group, or, and the main thing is you want to say who your members will be, what the dues are, how often you'll meet, and agree that your goal is growing happy plants or reading at least 1 book a month. Okay, then they have standing orders that include the emblem of the organization, the colors. There's an annual memorial lecture that's given. That's in honor of one of the founders. That's in there. When the dues notice shall occur, how the accrediting committee shall be made up and function, the fiscal year, some guidelines for the chapters and the regions. There's a new member kit that goes out. All this kind of stuff, some specifications on the annual session report, specifications of the AIP directory, which is what I'm reading from. Anyway, there's just a whole string of little nitty-gritty, it's like an operations manual, but those are put under standing rules. Then they've got a code of ethics that they publish, that's a 1.5 pages long. And then they have some rules for handling complaints and reporting ethical violations. And there's a procedure for that. You know, if one of us did something that another considered to be highly unethical that we heard about, then we could report that, and there's a process for censorship and appealing and disposing of that and so on. So, you know, your bylaws may be 15 or 20 pages long. They may be 3 or 4 pages long. Usually it takes at least 3 to get the parameters of the group defined. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's go over here and look at, did you have any follow-up questions? Okay, let's go over here to the visuals then and look at some motions. And we were working with these kinds of things with our building blocks before. Assume, if you will, and you may want to jot these down on a piece of paper or just get something you can work on to unscramble them. If all of these motions had been properly made, you know, maybe you're a messy presiding officer and as different motions were made, you were jotting them down on a little piece of paper. You know, okay, got previous question. And you were stacking them up in front of you, and then all your notes fell into the floor. Or somebody opened the door, a gust of wind came through, whatever. Okay, you know that all of these things were properly made, but now it's a question of which one are you going to handle first. You'll remember that we have to get a main motion. I hope I put one on there. Okay, we have to have a main motion on the floor in order for other things to be applicable. Now, we don't have main motion up here. Is there anything there that has the status of a main motion? Trissy?
Point of order?
No. A point of order is an incidental main motion. The only one that, and this was tricky, I should have started with an easier one. I think I put the hardest one up here first. The only one that has the status of a main motion is, well, it could be adjourn, but refer to committee. And that would be, really should say create a committee. But a motion to create a committee would have high priority. Or no, scratch that phrase, would have been made as the first item of business on the floor. So let's play it out. Remember we said if the motion to adjourn is made when there's no main motion pending, it has the status of a main motion. But it would be a little bit hard to refer all of these things on here or apply all of the things on here to the motion to adjourn. So we'll assume for the minute that this refer to committee is our main motion. Okay, which of these things are subsidiary motions that could apply to refer to committee? Is it debatable?
Limit debate.
Okay, we could limit debate. What else is a subsidiary motion? Okay, table is. Anything else?
Division question.
No, division, the question is a request. Okay, previous question is subsidiary. Okay, which ones are your privileged motions?
Question of privilege?
Question of privilege, okay.
Adjourn.
Adjourn, good. And what else? Recess, okay. Out of those privileged motions, which ones are, what's the most important? Adjourn. Okay. Out of this, then, what are we probably going to take first? No, these have all been made, okay, and they're on the floor. Now I'm getting ready to have you start voting on stuff. Okay, I would probably take the point of order first to make sure that we hadn't made an error in process, okay, that nothing was wrong, but that's not a ranking motion. Okay, then we would probably go to adjourn. Then what? Recess, okay. Then what? Okay. And after that? Let's see, let me get a little wider.
Question?
Okay, this one, let's just put a little star by it. It's an incidental motion too, like the privileged motion. And so probably you would have taken care of it as soon as, whoops, pointed the wrong way. Where did my, should have gone down. As soon as the refer to committee occurred. And what might have happened would be that that main motion was made. Somebody said, I move that we refer this to a committee to be appointed by the president to consist of 5 members and to report back by December 1st. And someone requests that we divide the question because they think December 1st is too soon to report back. So that one would kind of pop up and be taken care of. Okay, question of privilege, then what?
Table.
Okay, table has the next highest rank, and then
Previous question.
previous question, right? Then,
Committee.
oh, you missed one.
Limit time.
Limit
the
debate
time.
doesn't, yeah. Okay, so the limit debate's going to get a 7, and the refer to committee is what you'll actually vote on last. And if we'd had a main motion, which we'll just add down here, then the main motion would get a 9. If there'd been a main motion to paint the trash cans and somebody moved to refer that to committee, and then they moved to limit debate on whether or not to refer it to committee, and somebody moved the previous question, you see how they would occur. They would initially happen 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with the incidental motions, and you could put a star by the point of order or an asterisk by the point of order as well, because you're going to take care of those incidental motions as they arise. But I also I would put a 1 by the point of order because I would always take the point of order to find out if I were making an error in process. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, this one's got the main motion on there. This time, get them all in view here. We've got a main motion, point of information, fix the time to which to adjourn, refer to committee, division of the assembly, primary amendment, postpone indefinitely, adjourn, secondary amendment. Okay, think about what order those would be made in. Maybe we should, which one of those would likely be on the floor first?
Fixed time to adjourn. And which to adjourn?
Okay, that's the one you would dispose of first. Okay.
Same as we did last one.
First, let's go over here on the side and number them in the order they would probably be made, and that might make it easier to figure out which order you would dispose of them. So we'll do in the blanks the dispose order. But the first thing that would go on the floor is the main motion, right? If I say the floor is now open for new business or additional business, and it would be a main motion that occurred. Okay, which of those things would happen next?
Postpone indefinitely.
Okay, you know that because why?
That's next in order.
Okay, and none of those other things could, let me say it the other way. Postponed indefinitely can't be made if any of those other things are on the floor. So you know that it happened second. Okay, what would happen third?
Refer to committee?
Maybe, depending on what those amendments refer to. If the amendments are to refer, if the amendments apply to refer to committee, you could have refer to committee next. But probably,
I didn't see primary amendment.
okay, but probably the amendments refer to the main motion. Now, which one is made when? If I say I move to amend the main motion by striking out such and such words, is that a primary or a secondary
Primary
amendment?
motion.
Okay, that's the primary amendment, right. So that would come up next. What's a secondary amendment?
Changing the wording in the primary.
Okay, the secondary amendment changes the wording in the primary amendment, so that would have happened fourth. Okay, then what probably happened?
Refer to committee.
Refer to committee. Okay, then what?
There's no period of time.
And it's a trick question at this point. What could happen next?
Postpone indefinitely.
No, we already got that one second.
Point of information.
If you can see the little numbers there. Okay, any of these other three things could happen next. Point of information and division of the assembly are both incidental motions. And anywhere in this whole process, somebody could have said point of information, at which point we would pause and say, state your point of information, and we'd find out what they needed to know. How much money is in the bank, how many people are in the room, what time is lunch being served, whatever they wanted to know. So that could pop up at any time. Division of the assembly would occur at any point a vote had been taken. So you can't tell by the amount of information on this piece of paper how that worked. Okay, and so then of the ranking motions, adjourn would have been the last one made because it has the highest priority among those. So, okay, all of this stuff has been made, it's on the floor, it's pending before the assembly. We took care of the point of information division of the assembly. We'll take those off for right now. Okay, what are you going to do first? We're getting ready to vote. Now, somebody said, I move the previous question on all pending motions, and by a 2/3 vote, you adopted that and ordered the previous question on all pending motions, and now we're getting ready to vote, bam, 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 right down the line. What are you going to vote on first?
Whatever's at the top, adjourn.
Which one's at the top?
Adjourn.
Is it? Oh, we left a number off of one. What was made after adjourn? Right up here. Fix the time to which to adjourn would have been made 7th. Okay, I overlooked that one.
Vote
Okay.
on fixing the time
And
to adjourn.
you know with this little scenario that fix the time to which to adjourn was made last because none of these other things could have been made if fix the time was on the floor. Have I lost anybody? I lost anybody out there? Remember those ranking motions, and if you've forgotten, go back to the front of the tinted pages in Robert, where all those little arrows and that listed chart and everything is. Take a look at that and jog your memory on those. So okay, you're going to vote on them then in reverse order. Okay? So the first thing you'll vote on is fix the time to which to adjourn.
I've got a question. What
Okay.
happens if you adjourn?
Okay, if
And
you
then-
adjourn, then when you come back to your next meeting, next week, under unfinished business, you would have the main motion with everything up to refer to committee.
Question doesn't stand through, it'll carry over.
That would not carry to the next meeting, no, because this would become an agenda item at the next meeting. I'm pretty sure that's right. I'll double check it. But only the main motion and the subsidiary motions that are sticking to it, and the parliamentary word for that is adhere.
If we, like you said, like you had said, somebody called for previous questions on everything that was out there. If and when we got to adjourn, we would adjourn, and then that would be an agenda
Right.
item.
But usually, if we've just voted to order the previous question on all pending motions, that means we've just committed ourselves. We're going to sit here and we're going to vote on these suckers until we're through.
Even if adjourn comes up?
Well, it probably means we'll vote against adjourn
Okay.
for right now, and then as soon as we voted bam, 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 bam on everything, then we'll go back and move to adjourn and leave. So, yeah, this hypothetical scenario warps reality a little bit. Okay, so we might vote on fixing the time to which to adjourn so that we have a recessed meeting, come back 4 hours from now, or go for supper, come back in 2 hours. Okay, then what would we vote on next? And we'll just assume these are failing right now so that we keep going. Fix the time failed. What do you vote on next?
Adjourn.
Adjourn. Okay, that failed. What are we going to vote on next? Right. But we didn't refer it. That failed. What are we voting on now?
Postponing indefinitely.
No.
The secondary amendment?
The secondary amendment, which accidentally came up for. Okay, then what? Primary amendment. Then what?
Postpone.
Postpone indefinitely. And then the main motion. Okay, see how those numbers reverse? You make them in one order and dispose of them in the other. And last week we were stacking the blocks up to get that effect across. But you build them, you make them and build them in one order, and then you dispose of them by peeling them off the top if you're using that ladder metaphor. Okay, maybe we'll do a couple of these next time. Let me save 2 of these. I want to go back and get you thinking about the teller's report. Again, we can tidy up a little bit here. Okay, you'll remember, I think we looked at this visual once before. This is just a sample of a teller's report. Number of votes cast, 100. The number necessary for election is 51 in this case because a majority is what's needed if it's not otherwise specified. And there are the candidates and so forth. And a reminder that blanks are not counted. Okay, illegal votes, and they're sometimes called if I can say it, ineligible votes, are ones in which people voted for someone who was not eligible to run for office, or they marked a ballot in such a way that you can't tell who it's for. They put a real sloppy mark on there that covered across 2 of the lines. They wrote in a candidate's name, only you can't read their handwriting. There are a number of things you can do to a ballot that makes it too messy to make sense out of it. Why do you think you count the illegal or ineligible votes, but you don't count the blank votes? Got any idea what the philosophy there might be? Okay, well, you want to give it a shot?
Because it's part of the number of votes that were cast. Even though you can't read it, it was a part of the voting.
Okay, is a blank piece of paper not part of, if I take my ballot and I don't mark it, I just fold it and turn it in? Should that be counted?
Not voting at all. I mean, that's voting.
That's abstaining. Okay, why would somebody do that?
Maybe none of the candidates are to their expectations.
Well, but you didn't make a paper airplane and sail the ballot or tear it up and say, I can't stand these people. Okay. Sometimes you don't want people to know that you're not voting. And so but you're right on track with the rationale there, that those strange ballots that we just addressed indicate that the person tried to vote and they either were confused about who was eligible or they didn't make their wishes clear. But the idea is they did try to vote. They cast a vote. It just wasn't in order that it should be. Maybe they voted for someone who's not eligible to serve another term of office. But the blanks, the assumption is that if you turn in a blank piece of paper, you are intentionally abstaining. Normally, you don't count the abstentions unless the group calls for it, or if you need to show the abstentions in order to verify that a quorum was present. So there are a couple of reasons to show abstentions. But in a teller's report, you don't do that. Okay. Now, you need to know, let's see, we'll come back next time. We're going to go back and look again at bullet voting and proxy voting and some too. Okay. How many people are necessary for election here? Let's look at the top part of this first. 100 votes were cast, and here's Adam Smith, Jones, and so forth, and you've got 5 blanks. How many are necessary for election? Okay, 51. Why? Majority. Okay, you just had that on the other visual. Okay, what happens if 2/3 are required? Then how many votes do you need? Maybe this is an amendment of the bylaws. Previous notice went out. And take the names off up there. How many?
6?
Is it 66 or 30? It's not 33. That's not 2/3. Okay, you have a lot of motions that call for a 2/3 vote. You got to know how much 2/3 is. And you round off to the highest number.
7.
Okay, yeah. Wow, we got that one right here. Okay. And if it's a 3/4 vote, you're amending the Constitution or doing something heavy duty. 3/4 of 100 is 75. Okay. I gave you easy numbers to start with here. We're going to look next time, well, we probably won't even get into that today. We're going to look next time at a more complicated vote where we've got 26 people voting. But we'll bring that one back. And there's some others that we're going to calculate. And I think we've got about a minute or two left here. I want you to think about the concept of a plurality. Let me zoom in a little bit so the folks at home can read this one. Because I don't think we've talked about this before. A plurality refers to a person who receives the most number of votes but has not received a majority. Okay, receiving the most number of votes but not receiving a majority. And there are times, well, with the new board that was forming with the MSLEC group, they had to elect 3 directors to the board. They had about, they anticipated a large number of candidates. Normally, you would specify in your bylaws if a plurality elects. If it's not specified in the bylaws, then Robert says each candidate has to have a majority of the votes. And that can get you into runoff after runoff after runoff. So if you're in a situation, whether it's a city council election or new directors on a new board, any situation where you anticipate a large number of candidates, it may be useful to specify as part of the election procedures or to, once your bylaws are set up, to have it in there that election by plurality works, and that way you would just take the candidates with the highest number of votes, and those might be very close together. Okay, next time we're going to look some more at voting procedures and calculate some results of votes, some of which will involve pluralities, 2/3, and so forth. So kind of brush up on that section of the book if you need to. Bye-bye.